Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being with us today for this July Lunch and Learn. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know a few people may be joining us late, but as you enter, if you wouldn't mind putting your name and organization into the chat. And then if you could take yourself off camera and keep yourself muted until each presenter is done presenting, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. You can also enter questions in the chat at any time throughout the presentation, and I'll ask those questions at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'm going to get started just by doing a brief introduction for those who are not as familiar with the 2030 district, and then just a few updates that I have. And then I will turn it over to Andrew for our first presentation. So I just wanted to begin by letting folks in the room know what is the 2030 district. We are actually part of a national network. There's 24 districts across the United States, and we have 3 2030 districts in Michigan, in Grand Rapids, and Ann Arbor, as well as Detroit. And we are actually the 3rd largest 2030 district in North America. We have almost 60 million square feet committed to our program. And I did already mention we have 3 districts in Michigan. And so what are we aiming for? 2030 districts are really focused on supporting building owners and managers in reducing carbon emissions from their buildings and transportation. So looking at ways to reduce energy and water and emissions from transportation as well. Last fall, we hosted the 2030 Districts Network Summit in Detroit. And during that time, we brought all of the districts together and we revisited the goal of the 2030 districts. So there is a new adopted goal now that's accelerating to zero beyond 2030. So the 2030 districts exist to provide support and resources to the building owners and managers in their cities to find ways to reduce emissions in the entire built environment by 50 to 65% by 2030. And then beyond 2030, looking to reach zero emissions by 2040. So when I talk about zero emissions, what that means, we really spend a lot of time focusing on energy efficiency, electrification, clean grids, and reduced embodied emissions, as well as advocating for building codes and policies that support these efforts. We have 3 different member types, and several people in the room are members. So first we have building members, and those are the property owners and managers that sign a building into our program. It's free for any building in Detroit to enroll. We also have professional stakeholders, and our professional stakeholders are the companies that support us financially and support our mission. We have almost 40 professional stakeholders. We also have community stakeholders. So those are other environmental nonprofits in the city of Detroit that we partner with, that we support, and they support our work as well. So just a few numbers, stats of our district. Like I said, we're almost at 60 million square feet enrolled. We have a little over 460 buildings now, 42 professional stakeholders. Some of those professional stakeholders are also our statewide professional stakeholders. So they support not only the Detroit 2030 district, but also Ann Arbor and Grand Rapids. And we have 41 community stakeholders as well. This is our board. So you might see some familiar faces here. And I think we have at least one or a few board members that are here with us today. So thank you for being with us. We also have 3 best practices groups. The first group is a venue and museum group. Actually, the museum group separated from the venue group and grew into a national group, which is very exciting. We also have houses of worship best practice group and multifamily. And so these are groups that meet quarterly. We bring together buildings of a certain same building type and share best practices. In addition to our houses of worship best practice group. We also have had 2 cohorts of the Houses of Worship treasure hunt competition. So this year we just wrapped up our 2nd cohort, and these are some of the Houses of Worship that participated in the program. And it was I believe a 6-month program where we met monthly with each House of Worship. We also recently hosted the 2nd annual Detroit Energy Challenge Awards Breakfast. The Detroit Energy Challenge launched in 2020 in partnership with the City of Detroit and the Michigan Battle of the Buildings. And so we're excited to have this program up and running, where we get to celebrate and award Detroit's biggest losers. So those buildings that are reducing their energy consumption the greatest from the prior year. So I put some updated information in here that I just wanted to make everybody aware of. So the next competition is going to compare 2023 to 2022 usage. So we're looking for buildings that are reducing their energy consumption the greatest. The data is due by March 13th of next year, and we are here to support our building members in getting that data updated. Your data has to be updated in Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So the majority of our building members are already using Energy Star, but if you need any support with that, that is what we're here for. And I also wanted to put a note to save the date. The 10th annual Michigan Energy Summit is going to be in Grand Rapids on May 15th of next year. That summit will award the Michigan Battle of the Buildings, so the statewide competition. And then look for more from us next June. The date is to be determined for the next Detroit Awards Breakfast. This is brand new, and we will have more information coming on this, but we recently partnered with Green Living Science, and I'm actually sitting in their new office space currently, temporarily today. So we partnered with them on an Eagle grant that will be looking to expand recycling in 1,500 multifamily buildings across the city. So we are definitely going to want to work with our 2030 district building members that are multifamily buildings, and also those that are not, and really get the message out on expanding recycling through the city's new commercial recycling program. I'm almost finished here, but I just wanted to say a big thank you to our platinum stakeholders that support the Detroit 2030 district, and also to our funding partners. And last but not least, all of the 40+ professional stakeholders that support the Detroit 2030 district. And if you are interested and you're not already following us, there are lots of ways you can get involved, adding a program or a building into our program, being an event sponsor, becoming a professional stakeholder, or volunteering. Feel free to reach out to myself or Connie at any time. We send out monthly newsletters that usually contain a lot of the most updated information, but you can also follow us on social media as well. So thank you for letting me provide that update. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that Andrew can share his slides.
Perfect. Thank you, Kendall. Appreciate it. Can everybody hear me okay on your end?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you for everybody for joining the Lunch and Learn today. I was very excited when Kendall reached out and asked if I'd be willing to share a little about myself and Ameresco and some of the great things that we're getting involved in, locally in the state of Michigan, and then also around the country, and for that matter globally as well. So before I share my deck, I'll just introduce myself real quick. My name again is Andrew Hasher. Work for Ameresco. I am the Michigan rep for the company. I am a member of the 2030 district as of, I think, about 3 or 4 months ago. So I'm really excited to really spend more time getting involved with the organization, and taking part of all the great activities that are going on across the state. As Kendall alluded to, there are 3 different districts in Michigan, so Grand Rapids and Ann Arbor being the other ones that Ameresco is part of, and I'm working to support wherever we can. So I am located in Grand Rapids, Michigan, born and raised Michigander through and through. So you'll see me in Southeast Michigan a lot too, if that's where you reside, but nonetheless, kind of running around the entire state, working with a lot of different organizations and supporting them through, their energy goals that they may or may have or may be looking to have. So let's go ahead and share my screen. Let me know when you can see it. And I will go into presentation mode.
I can't see the slides yet, Andrew.
You should.
There we go. Here they come.
Now.
Thank you.
There's a little bit of a delay.
Thank you.
All right, now let's go into presentation mode. There we go. So me being kind of outside of Grand Rapids, I'm in a small farm town. So we don't have broadband in my area. So we got a great T-Mobile program that typically works well, but as many of you may have seen, the challenges that we have with broadband across our state, and some great things going to help improve that. So my apologies if there's any glitches here. So Ameresco, who are we, right? So we're a clean tech integrator that focuses on renewable energy efficiency, and other types of projects across the United States and across the globe. We are a company that's publicly traded. You'll see us on the New York Stock Exchange. We were founded in 2000. So, we're 23 years young. We've done a lot of great things in that time, but we're really looking to continue that success and drive more clean tech integrations across our US territory and across the globe. So a couple high level stats. I don't want to read these verbatim. I know that you guys get slide decked out, but hopefully this will kind of give you some idea of who we are, or if you know who we are, kind of give you a little bit more insight to some of the things that we're doing. So we do have roughly about 1,300 employees across the country, focused on a lot of different areas that we'll get into in a bit here. We've done about $13 billion in projects over that time, in a wide range of fashions, a lot of different technology and a lot of different customers. And I'll showcase some of those here in a little bit. So when you look at some of the market reach and some of the things that we've done over the years, by definition, we originated as a quote unquote ESCO, so an energy services company. We now transition more into that, clean tech and energy efficiency integrator, just because, not every time an ESCO or energy services performance contract or energy solutions performance contract, depending on the acronym or how people describe it, but we've kind of transitioned to more of, integrating a lot of other technologies outside of a true, ESCO arrangement. But as far as the ESCO market, Ameresco has really showed its strengths in supporting those types of projects, and have really excelled across the market and being a leader in that space. So this kind of just demonstrates some of that success that we've had, along with the next few slides. So just kind of like representing what we've done and the support we've gotten across the different organizations in the country, in some of the different industry sectors, and the awards that we've won. So it's really just kind of showcasing the great work that we've done in collaboration with our community and local partners to really drive projects and get those things done. This slide, like in the news, some of these clips may be old, but one thing I would recommend if anyone's trying to get an idea of some of those newer projects that are taking place, set yourself a Google alert, go onto LinkedIn, follow Ameresco. I like to share a lot of things, so feel free to share or connect with me on LinkedIn. But there is a great effort in our social media department to really get some of those newer great projects kind of out there and just let everybody know what's going on. From large battery storage projects that you're seeing across the country, large solar installations, and then a lot of the advanced renewable natural gas, and eventually you're going to see a lot of great things in hydrogen as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but that's kind of what I wanted to share with the news. Like, just stay in tune, stay in front of it. You'll see a lot of great things coming down the pike. So I mentioned kind of our territory, what our reach is, where we're working. We started in the U.S. We've been focusing on the U.S. And we'll have a lot of advanced activities here, in the future, especially as these great federal funds are flowing through our federal partners and state partners. We're going to see a lot more activity. We also do a lot of work over in the UK. So you'll see some of those articles and links that you see get shot out. We'll talk about great projects we're doing in the UK, and as well as over into Europe more formally. We're seeing more growth. We've acquired a couple of companies over in Greece and looking to expand our footprint in the European Union as well. So who do we work with? Who do we serve? We like to partner a lot of different sectors, but you can kind of see from this slide that we really work with all different aspects of industry, different communities, state and municipal government leaders, retail, public housing. There's a lot of activity and really trying to drive the need for public housing and really advancing the clean tech and the energy efficiency needs in those facilities. My focus has been for a little bit here, a lot of K-12, a lot of government, higher ed, but nonetheless, we do work across all different sectors in different fashions. So what are we focused on, right? We're all here today, I think, because we're talking about, a low carbon future, really trying to drive those projects and help reduce our GHG impacts and understanding how we can get there, right? We know they have some really good goals, really strong goals, but we know that there's going to be a lot of work needed to do that. So, since 2010, the projects that Ameresco has been involved with has really showcased a lot of those projects and really helping support those metrics to really drive down our carbon footprint. I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, what do we do? Like, what is the technology? What type of projects do we get into? So this kind of showcases, the 5 pillars per se. And then the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more in depth of these. So, energy efficiency as a core part of our business, right? Getting in, helping those entities understand how you can replace, the simple things, right? The low-hanging fruit that we've talked about for so long with batteries and building management systems and reducing their energy footprint, just in simple low-hanging fruit. We look at how do we tackle those types of projects before maybe we spin to the next pillar, which is distributed energy generation. So looking at solar, looking at microgrids, understanding how we can integrate those technologies into different buildings across our state and across our country is very important. But nonetheless, if you're going to put a system in, we want to make sure you right size that system for the way your building operates. So if you haven't done all the energy efficiency measures, we typically would like to get that done first before we try looking at solar systems and how we integrate battery technology so that we don't oversize and spend too much. So as you kind of go around the core pillars there, you look at infrastructure, you look at energy analytics, right? Those are going to be very important to understanding how those changes to those buildings and to our infrastructure are going to impact the bottom line, right? Looking at the GHG reduction, looking at our KWH and KW demand reduction, right? Those types of things are so critical to understanding what it's going to do to our environment over the long term. And then that last pillar is just operations and maintenance, right? How can we support the long needs of these assets and these projects to make sure that they're operating effectively, from now into the future? And again, as I mentioned, this kind of digs deeper into each of those sections. I'm not going to go through the first 5, right? The energy efficiency, analytics, distributed generation, infrastructure, and O&M. Those are very self-explanatory to a point, but I'd be more than happy to go offline with anybody and dig into them further. One thing I wanted to dig into was that last column there, which is smart building solutions. So about 2 years ago, give or take, Ameresco acquired a company out of Ohio called PlugSmart. PlugSmart was essentially a small regional ESCO who actually specializes in building control systems. So the beauty of bringing PlugSmart into the portfolio was having a resource to actually turnkey and self-implement our own control systems. ESCOs traditionally would potentially use a third-party outside building control system organization to help them implement those types of technologies. Well, the PlugSmart acquisition really changes that. So PlugSmart was working in Metro Detroit. You'll see a couple of projects here at the end here that showcase that. But what does is allows anybody in the Metro Detroit region and Southern Michigan for now to leverage our team when it comes to retro commissioning, installation of new non-proprietary building management systems, and just helping drive those analytics. So I'm really proud to be able to provide that team to everybody on this call in Metro Detroit, and even for that matter further out, because I know there's others on this call that have a much further reach. So that team is looking to grow across Ameresco's footprint and expand into other markets too. So very excited for that and happy to have them as part of our team. So when we talk about all of those solutions, all of this technology, all of these great things that we're looking to do, one of the biggest hurdles that clearly we all know is how do we pay for them? So one of Ameresco's strong suits is really helping drive the financial aspects of a project that we're looking to take on, right? So, $13+ billion in energy solutions over the years is what Ameresco has brought to the table, and it's going to continue to grow. So some of you have been very well aware of the different types of structures, but for those that have not heard of different opportunities for you to look at, we talk about performance contracting, right? Putting together a package where the energy savings helps support the capital costs and the infrastructure. So how do we make sure that these projects are budget neutral so that essentially the energy savings reduction is helping support that, that financing mechanism, that monthly payment sort of, so to speak. The next one, and I won't go through all these, I'll go through a few heavy hitters, but the next one I really wanted to talk about was the DBOOM, or design, build, own, operate, maintain. We're really seeing a lot of activity in this space. And later on, I'll show you a slide of a project that we actually have in Wayne, Michigan, your Canton there. That's exactly this type of scenario where Ameresco is basically turnkey the entire project, and then essentially will sell off the commodity. And I'll explain that a little bit further here on a specific project. And then one other one that's really starting to see more action is that bottom right one. We've heard software as a service. We've heard of subscription-based applications like Netflix and Spotify. Well, energy as a service is really another avenue, another financial vehicle that's really starting to see more light. Maybe in our C&I or commercial industrial space, we're getting a lot more appetite for that, where Ameresco would help finance those projects on our books, take all of that equipment, all those assets under our purview, and we'll be the ones that help manage that overall project. It's similar to design, build, own, operate, maintain, that DBOOM, but it brings a little bit different flavor to it. So it's really helping support those resiliency plays with batteries and solar that industrials may have, and also the sustainability goals that they are starting to see from a corporate level across the organizations in our country. So a few others that we can touch on, but I won't get too far deep into them. One more thing before I move on to the next slide would be, we have innovative funding, right? When it comes to like renewable energy certificates. The other areas are grants, utility rebates, and tax credits. So I know we've had a lot of conversations, and I was debating if I put a slide in here or not, but we all know there's a lot of money flowing from the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and a lot of other great programs that we're going to see come out of EAGLE in different energy office groups and things across the state. So those are types of buckets of monies that we look to bring to the table, help procure them, help put in the applications, and help support all the different entities to make sure that we can secure dollars and help buy down some of those projects before we maybe have to go to a third-party financer or tap into operational budgets, those sorts of things. So a lot of different avenues, a lot of different things that we can look at. Another slide. This really just kind of showcases that strong capability of financing, right? Some of those resources are sources that we tap into, right? You look at infrastructure funds, pension funds, contractors, operators, in the equity bucket side of the space. And then your traditional debt providers, right? You look at going to a bank, getting a basic loan, right? We look at private placement, we look at bonds. A lot of energy bonds are being used these days in the K-12 space, where they can go out, take care of all these energy efficiency, solar projects they want to get done, and help tackle that long-term deferred maintenance and other kind of challenges that they're having with funding large capital projects. So a lot of great avenues for entities to tap into if they don't have the funds internally to really get these projects moving. Because as I mentioned before, we all have great aspirations and goals and really want to start attacking this, but many times what we're seeing is the financials are really the biggest hurdle in getting these things done. So what I'm going to do is move on. I'm going to run through a handful of project examples. I'm not going to go too deep into them, but I just want to showcase some of the different structures and different types of projects that we've worked on across the U.S. And then I'll touch on a couple in Michigan that we've worked on, and I can always discuss some others that we have going on right now too. But for privacy and some sensitive information, we can't do publicly just yet. So here's one that was done quite a few years ago. This was with BMW, but really it helped maximize a landfill that was in the area, allowed Ameresco to help design, build, and own a processing plant that then was used to fuel a cogeneration facility, which ultimately led to energy in the plant and different types of steam and that sort of things that's used in their manufacturing. So this is a great example of leveraging that energy as a service and design build and cogeneration, all these amazing technologies that are out there to tackle some needs that they had at a plant in South Carolina. This next one is one of the coolest that I've seen yet. It's a school in Ontario that is one of the first to go net zero in Canada. So this was an amazing project that Ameresco worked on that supplied a whole sorts of different technologies, right? Between geothermal, battery storage, solar, and then the true core energy efficiency measures that you typically see, but bringing them all under a different type of bucket, right, with energy as a service and other financial mechanisms to make this project happen. So really neat project. Hopefully we can start driving more of these types of solutions in Michigan, especially with some regulatory proposals that are out there in legislation that would allow for more, solar and net zero aspirations that we have in Michigan. A few others, looking at national partners, right? Wells Fargo, the financial institutions across the US are really focused on driving down their global GHG and carbon footprints. They're really focused on these. So here's just a case study from Wells Fargo, a lot of different sites across their footprint in the US, a lot of solar, a lot of different ground mount carports, that sort of thing. Pretty neat project, but it just shows the global reach for some of these that we've been able to tackle for them. Municipalities have some great assets that are very expensive to maintain and operate. So one that we've engaged in, worked on, was a wastewater treatment plant in Arizona, in Phoenix. They were able to basically allow Ameresco to do that de-boom methodology I mentioned, but it's basically taking that wastewater biogas and converting it into renewable natural gas. So a lot of fascinating things taking place in this space. Grand Rapids just commissioned a really cool plant down in just outside of downtown. So if you're ever in town and you're able to support and see that, it's a really cool one that's taking place. The one that I wanted to showcase that are local is in Wayne, right off 94. Ameresco has a project that we did a number of years back, but there's some other advancements that may be going on there with basically a landfill that Waste Management owns and operates, where we essentially take the offtake, the gas from the landfill, process it, turn it into RNG. And I think a lot of that offtake right now, I'm not 100% sure, but I think most of that is, it's injected into DTE grid, the gas supply system in the area. And then a lot of those green RECs, carbon offsets that are out there are coming through that supply that we provide. Last couple before I'm done is Monroe Community College, an amazing project our team did. It's been commissioned for a little bit, but they're really starting to, we want to showcase this a little bit more because of the great things they did. So they had an old energy plant in the campus that served steam throughout the buildings, and essentially we'd be able to retrofit that into a geothermal installation. So over 320 square foot, it's a $16 million project, and they were going to see the savings about $250,000 a year. So really great project. With the Inflation Reduction Act, we're seeing a lot more activity in geothermal retrofits, which is amazing. So we're going to find more of those projects actually come into fruition versus just kind of running through the feasibility of them. And the last one I'll mention in Michigan that PlugSmart did, among some others that they did, was the Detroit Yacht Club. So they had a need for some new boilers, some new control systems, lighting, really the core energy efficiency measures at the club. And PlugSmart at the time was able to go in, help turnkey that project, and really get them up to date and modernize with their infrastructure internally. So those are some of the projects that we've done. There's a lot more we can dig into and I can discuss, or any case studies that anyone thinks they may want to see in different sectors. There's plenty to see, but I don't want to bore you with too many of those. So to wrap up, a couple different resources for anybody on the call that may have desires to look at some resources that are out there. This link will take you to a great white paper that Ameresco has in there. It just helps you to understand the steps to get to, to help with your net zero goals and aspirations. So you can go on there, click on there, get that link. It's really cool, pretty easy to read through and kind of understand some of those steps. And then this last one is really neat. It's called our Be Safe calculator. So we talked about Energy Star. There's a lot of great resources out there for that. Ameresco, as an organization, uses a product called Asset Planner. An asset planner is like our management tool, but in that has been all of our projects that have taken out all the energy consumption, all the data that's been pulled from the different building projects we've done and injected it into our database. So if you go on here, you can put in your own building information and it can really give you some good tools and compare you to other peer sets that may align with your type of building stock. So take a look at it. If you have any questions, reach out to me. We can dig into it a little bit further, but it's a pretty easy free tool that you can use. And then finally, Ameresco, right? Our core mission is doing well by doing good. I know we've heard this probably from other organizations, but it really just shows the core of what we do every day. So working in a lot of federal military projects, right, with critical infrastructure, the resiliency in our military is very key. In the event of any strikes or anything at our bases, we've helped take a lot of those bases off grid in the event that they can't tap into the local utility. We talk about healthcare. We talk about community housing. Getting that building stock up to date and operational so that we can expand and get more people housing that need that. And then you talk about the bottom one, greater public safety. I know on the news a number of years ago when I was working for the utility, DT did a great thing and got all the lights up and running in the city of Detroit. That provides a lot of safety for the community members and those that are walking through the city. We do a lot of this across the country, so it's really neat to be able to say, hey, we didn't do the DTE one, but it's very similar in nature that we've done in Memphis and Chicago and other big cities across our US. So yeah, just really wanted to showcase some of those items. There's a lot that we can dig into, but I really appreciate getting the opportunity, Kendall, and spreading the message and really supporting the 2030 district and everybody here in Michigan, because we've done a lot of great things, but we know we have a long way to go. So hopefully we can be part of that.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Great presentation. I love seeing those case studies too, especially some of the local Michigan and Detroit projects. I did not receive any questions in the chat. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand now or put them in the chat. We are going to have some time at the end as well. Andrew, did you have your contact information on that last slide, or are you okay with sharing your contact info in the chat if people are interested in reaching out to you?
Yep, I had it on there and I'll drop in the chat as well.
Thank you. And actually, if you have that white paper link handy, I was interested in viewing that. I don't know if others would too, but if you don't mind dropping that in the chat also.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, just continue to put them in the chat, or we will get to them at the end. So thanks, Andrew. So I'm gonna now hand it over to
excuse me, Kendall. This is Mike Wimberly. Hi, everyone. I had a question just in terms of gaining access to the funding to be able to afford to do this. Was it complicated or convoluted in terms of applying for the grants and stuff like that? And then for the bond issue, is there a particular law firm that's specializing in helping with the bond issue?
So I guess as far as the grants, I guess I'll address it as far as there's a lot of different grants that are out there right now, almost overwhelmingly a lot of different grants from the federal level to the state level, and probably even going to boil down to local communities that are going to be putting these grants out. So what I'll say, Mike, is there are a lot of them. Some are simpler than others to get a hold of. A lot of times there could be some long, lengthy application processes. We just worked through a handful for a federal schools program that did take a lot of time and investment, but there's a way to do them. So depending on what you're thinking about, what you're looking at, I just let me know and I can point you in the right direction if it's something that we're aware of or not. We do have somebody, a representative that sits in DC federally and works with the local, all the stakeholders from Jigger Shaw and down, and really making sure those dollars are flowing and supporting that the best we can. And then as far as bonding, there are different legal firms, that will do different type of entities, between schools, local municipalities. So if there's anything specific you're looking for, I guess let me know, and I could probably refer you to a couple different avenues depending on what that need may be.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yep.
Okay, so I would like to turn it over to our next presenter, to Trisha. And Trisha, you're going to share your screen. Let me know if you have any issue there. Looks good.
All right. So I'm going to run through a deck on green standards for affordable housing. I apologize in advance. My screen is over here, so if I'm looking to the side. But my name is Trisha DeMarco. I'm the Detroit market lead for Spalding DeDecker. I'm passionate about green design and myself a lead AP and sites AP. Spalding DeDecker is based in 5 offices. I'm in the Detroit office, but we also have a location in Rochester Hills. That's our headquarters, Lansing, Novi, and Grand Rapids. In the sustainability space, we have services around green metric administration. So helping to manage the administration of green standards and all of the application, point management, the trade-off between value and cost of points, green civil engineering design, sustainable design that meets standards for LEED sites, NGBS, and then stormwater management, net zero water planning. So starting really at the mandatory thresholds for stormwater management, and then being able to advise and design beyond that, really to whatever the limits are that the project is looking for, all the way up to net zero water. And that's all in addition to our core services around urban planning, surveying, construction, inspection. So that's just a little bit about Spalding DeDecker. We're involved in the project from the concept development all the way through the completion, the sale of the property, the completion of construction in some cases, and really offer a wide range of services throughout that entire continuum. We've worked on a number of projects that have had aggressive affordable housing goals, which any of us working in the city of Detroit certainly understand the importance of implementing affordable housing and how critical that is to meeting our needs as a community. So we've had the opportunity to work on a number of projects, a couple of which I'll highlight here, that have leveraged MSHDA LIHTC funding, low income housing tax credit funding, as an opportunity to meet the affordability thresholds that are really demanded in this market. One of which that you see on the screen here is Trumbull Crossings. This is an affordable housing development built back in urban renewal, 1960s, 70s, continued to expand over time, and is due for a rehab. The rehabilitation cost is being funded in part by MSHDA LIHTC funding, and there's been a really nice opportunity to re-envision some of the land and the property there that was currently underutilized as parking, created a high maintenance cost, had lighting that wasn't functioning, and trees that had died over time within the parking area. We've been able to actually reduce the footprint of the parking, bring parking closer to where people actually need it and use it in the development, and then implement a stormwater, a pretty aggressive bioretention basin in the front of the property. On the Preserves on Ash project, this is an affordable housing project that is coming to the North Corktown neighborhood, part of the Choice Neighborhood Grant that the city of Detroit has been able to leverage. And this is really a critical piece of that Choice Neighborhood package, bringing on about 180 affordable housing units in North Corktown. And then an art space, which is an upcoming development in Mount Clemens, which is looking at using low-income housing tax credits to increase affordability for artists within the community. And so a slightly different, market than you might typically see, but certainly the same from a socioeconomic needs standpoint. So the MSHDA low-income housing tax credit program has an aggressive allocation requirement. The QAP, as they call it, Qualified Allocation Program, really targets promoting safe, decent, and affordable housing using policies that pertain to healthy, green, and sustainable building practices. So when you look at the QAP, which is that Qualified Allocation Plan that each project needs to put together, the higher the number of points you can get, the more attractive your project is for funding. So I'll say that again another way: the more points you get, the more likely you are to get the dollars to help close your funding gaps on affordable housing projects. So every point is really critical within these applications. And certainly the low income housing tax credit is hitting on some tenets of sustainability inherently, with affordability and equity and access to housing. But really there's one core piece of that around green policy that I'm going to touch on today that really gets to green development, green design, and the use of green metrics to track that. So that's all covered under the Qualified Allocation Plan Green Policy document. So when looking at a project that's going in for low-income housing tax credit, you are required to have some green metricing on the project. There are some options that just meet the threshold of what would be required. Those are on the screen now. You can do the Enterprise Green Communities, National Green Building Standards. You'll see me abbreviate that as NGBS, or LEED. And you can do LEED, silver, gold, platinum. Those are all baseline requirements. Pick one and you're meeting the baseline. Over and above those threshold requirements, there are opportunities for gaining additional points. And I mentioned how critical those additional points are to having that differential that's going to be the difference between your project getting funded or your project potentially being held off until a future funding cycle. So additional points can come with Enterprise Green Communities Plus. It can come with National Green Building Standards Green and Zero Energy. It can come with LEED Zero Energy or Passive House. And I'm going to touch on some of the most common green metric thresholds that we see that are being leveraged on the projects that we're participating in. Looking at NGBS, National Green Building Standard, there are 4 thresholds that you can meet for this requirement. And, this is one that I would say we see probably used in a high percentage of our portfolios because it is one of the threshold options that is the pathway to achievement is more aligned with best practices and best standards on a project. You take a look, this is just a snapshot of a portion of the scorecard for NGBS. And you can see bronze would require 35 points, silver 49, gold 78, emerald 106. There are a lot of similarities between a number of these programs in the types of things that the programs prioritize. A couple of common threads that you'll see in any of these programs are things like integrative design teams, which is where it's not just an architect working on architecture. It's not just an engineer working on engineering. It's really building in these mandatory crossover moments where contractor, architect, engineer, owner, user in many cases are all in the room at the same time and helping to advise on the program. LEED was another option. And depending on what threshold, so any of these thresholds meet the baseline requirement, the threshold requirement for your QAP. So that could be anywhere between 40 to 80 points. Really, the opportunity for additional points comes in with that addition of the net zero. And the LEED scorecard, for those who have gone through the LEED process before, you've certainly seen this or something similar to. There are different types of qualifications or project typologies that you can use to go through the LEED track. But in any of them, the scorecard is very similar in some of the requirements that you need to meet. A few highlights under LEED in many of these, again, a common thread is that there are some mandatory thresholds that have to be met. So if you're not meeting some of these mandatory thresholds and prerequisites, then it doesn't matter how many points you would get. You really have to hit the mandatory items first in 100% of them. After the mandatory, that's where the additional points come in. So our prerequisites are noted here for outdoor and indoor water use, building level, water meter, indoor air quality, recyclables, and then there's some with site selection as well. So there are a number of those items that when you begin a project, before you check in the box for your QAP, for your low-income housing tax credit, that you're going to pursue LEED, at minimum in any of these programs, you want to make sure that you're meeting the prereqs or the mandatory requirements, as they're called in some of the other programs. So enterprise green threshold requirement is just enterprise green, which is meeting all of those mandatory requirements plus 40 or 35 points depending on the building typology. So whether it's a new construction or a rehab. And then if you want to pursue the additional 3 points, then you'd be going for enterprise green plus, which integrates in credit 5.2C or 5.4. And 5.2C is really moving to net zero or moving toward zero energy and near zero certification. This point is really about demonstrating effort and making positive forward movement. Whereas the 5.4 credit, which is achieving zero energy, is meeting the criteria. So you can see some projects, especially rehab projects, you might not be able to meet 100% of the zero energy, but if you can demonstrate that you're making a substantial effort toward zero energy, you would qualify for this 5.2B credit. And then the passive house program is the last one that I'm going to touch on, and this is worth the most additional points with MSHDA, LIHTC qualifications. The passive house program, as it used to be, branded, has now been expanded to be residential, commercial, rehab projects, and it's really focused primarily on the building envelope, so not as much on sites or the exterior of the building, but it's really focused on getting to that net zero. So you can see some of the criteria that they're trying to really incentivize through passive house, including looking at the enclosures, reducing your radiation into the building, looking at moisture control. So each one of these, humidity, indoor air quality, factor into your ability to qualify for passive housing. And passive house is really the most aggressive of all of these stated criteria, where you can get 4 points, which is the maximum number of additional points for green credits. So maximizing QAP points for your project, I think some key takeaways are, it's important to remember that, MSHDA LIHTC funding, a core tenet is around sustainability and green design, and that these points are pretty critical to being a differentiator. You can imagine a lot of the projects line up very similarly around cost efficiency, around affordability metrics, but we often see that the green metrics are an opportunity to get points that your competitor projects may not be leveraging. So more and more we're seeing that projects are going for additional points, and the ones that are being selected for funding are the ones that are doing the more aggressive green standards. Which of the green standards to pursue is really dependent on the project type, the funding, total funding package, what your project goals are. I have projects that are pursuing passive house, and I have projects that are just meeting threshold requirements. But I think that decision in between for which is going to get you the most competitiveness, which is going to meet your project goals and objectives the best, that is a critical decision before your QAP is even filed. And that's something that at Spalding DeDecker we have compiled a tool to help compare some of the pros and cons of the different metricing systems to help identify how much additional effort is it for the additional points, and which really align the best with the project goals. So again, I'm Tricia DeMarco. I'm with Spalding DeDecker, and if you have any other questions about low-income housing tax credits or green standard administration and green design, certainly take down my information and let's discuss further. I know we have just a couple minutes here left for any questions.
Thank you, Tricia. Yeah, we have about 5 minutes left. And so I didn't see any questions in the chat, but feel free to raise your hand and come off mute if you have any questions for Tricia or for Andrew.
I'm curious if you have anyone on the call that's looking to do an affordable housing project that leverages low-income housing tax credits. Anyone who's involved in a project?
Hi, this is Mike again. While people are pondering that question you asked, Tricia, I had a question for you about the artist, the Mount Clemens artist project. Could you, how does that work in terms of, are there like studios in the project? I mean, what makes an art project an art project?
Yeah, I think part of it is, and I'm not, the developer, so I'm going to give you my interpretation of what it is, but I'm not the foremost expert. But my understanding is that part of it is selection to be within the project is based on an RFP process. So you would actually, submit a portfolio or a package of work, kind of demonstrating why this space is the best fit. And some of it is kind of geared toward creating spaces that would best serve creatives. I don't know if any of you are crafters, but I certainly am. And if I don't have a space for my sewing machine or my paints or whatever it is, it ends up on the kitchen table. So I think part of it is creating space that works for people who work in that way. And then the selection of the mix of tenants would really create an artistic community support group that is empowering others. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had one more question. An artist equals a vow of poverty. So how do you qualify for that? I mean, are there lower standards for financial or what?
Yeah, so these are all low income housing tax credit, affordable housing projects, all of the examples that I provided today. And so that's part of it, is that, we know that within the arts, there are a number of people who want to pursue arts full-time or on a more regular basis, and that cost of housing is a constraint to that. So yeah, this funding mechanism helps to offset the cost of rent for artists specifically.
Thank you.
The economic thresholds.
Jane, did you have a question?
For the City of Detroit pilot tax credit, can you talk at all about that?
Ooh, the pilot tax credit. Tell me more.
I was kind of hoping you would tell me more.
Well, I guess it depends on, I don't know of anything under the name of a pilot tax credit, but they do have a number of different tax credits. Are you thinking of something residential, commercial?
I'm aware that when Detroit Catholic Pastoral Alliance did their housing projects, specifically Milwaukee Junction, but they've done a number of them, and that's just one I can talk about off the top of my head, talked about the importance of the pilot tax credit in the total application to MISTA for LIHTC.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know anything by that name, but I do know that, we're also in the Milwaukee Junction neighborhood. So, I know there have been some LIHTC projects, and then, there are a number of other tax credits that we help projects kind of leverage. So I wish I could speak more to that one specifically, but.
Could you speak more generally then to the tax credit program in the City of Detroit for something like affordable housing?
Yeah, so I'll say that any project within the City of Detroit that receives tax incentives is required to provide at minimum 20% of their units at 80% of the average mean income or lower. What we do know is that that's often not enough to meet the requirements for what the market really needs. 80% AMI is still much higher than what a lot of people need for housing costs in the City of Detroit. So the low-income housing tax credits that I'm referring to here today really help close that gap that allows deeper affordability and more access to communities to stabilize communities and allow people to stay in place and have access to housing options, even as other market pressures come in. There are other programs through the City of Detroit, for residents, for instance, to qualify for 0% home loans, home repair loans, and then, a lot of other commercial opportunities like brownfield tax credits and, new enterprise zones and that sort of thing. So I'm not sure if any of those in particular resonate with you.
It's helpful to have that as sort of an umbrella background. Thank you.
Yeah. Jane, are you in the City of Detroit?
Yes.
And what neighborhood do you, spend most of your time?
Primarily Northwest Detroit.
Okay, nice.
All right, well, we are past 1 o'clock, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. But yeah, thank you again to both Trisha and Andrew for presenting today and providing your contact info. So if anyone has additional questions, feel free to reach out to them. And I hope everybody has a good weekend and stay safe with the weather that we're expected to have. But have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kendall. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank y'all. Y'all have a blessed weekend.